we're shooting for 5 million this year in revenue. And that's just a lot of risk to take if 90+% of that is all one source. If you sell a PS4, for example, with $6,000 worth of digital games on it, it's not worth any more. It's just worth what a PS4 is costing because GameStop or someone like us is just going to wipe it anyway, right? Pressure is a privilege. When things are hard, when we are in that stage of business where we need the sixth, but we only have 5, and I'm spending every day going to sleep and waking up thinking about all of our business problems and how to take us to the next level without everything spontaneously combusting, I try to remind myself and trigger that frame of pressure is a privilege. I worked really hard to get to feel this pain.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Side Hustle Experiment podcast. Today we have Caleb. He is Phoenix reseller on YouTube. He sells video games on Amazon, whatnot, all sorts of different platforms. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so give us a brief intro, man. Like how'd you get started with all this stuff? How long have you been doing it?
Yeah, so I've been flipping stuff for the last 6 or 7 years. I started it as a side hustle while my wife was in law school, just trying to make some extra money because we were pretty much broke. And just found some folks flipping stuff from like yard sales and thrift stores on YouTube. So I sort of dove in, learned everything that I could about it. And within a week or so, I took a trip to Goodwill, found this old wooden sign that I listed on Facebook Marketplace, bought it for $5 and sold it for like $30, and would have sworn that I was the richest man in the world. And since then have pretty much just been hooked. Started out really getting into selling used books on Amazon, mostly from thrift stores and book sales. Then over time, I realized that I could find video games pretty consistently at pawn shops. Pawn shops are a place that a lot of people don't really like to source. So I would go in there and, haggle for as much inventory as I could. And then started really developing my video game knowledge. I would go to game stores, sometimes mom and pop game stores, and do bulk deals for inventory. I would go to video game conventions and do deals with vendors there because the market prices that you can get for used video games on Amazon are really solid. And so since then, I have really just been focusing on that niche at this point. We're still probably for the next couple months or so in my basement, but in the last year or so, I've hired about 5 full-time people now and probably 4 part-timers, right? We're stretching the capacity of my basement and really trying to scale the Amazon business up, along with a video game buyback website that I created last year called MyQuickFlips.com, which allows people to submit their video games to us for really competitive prices and not have to deal with any of the hassle of like listing stuff, shipping stuff, photographs, item specifics. So that's allowed us to unlock a new level of inventory. And right now we're kind of in a stage of trying to scale the amount of inventory that we now have access to through that.
Yeah, I was looking at the website. It's awesome. It's like, how was the idea to do that? Because maybe you have competitors, but like GameStop, maybe that'd be like the only type of thing. So what was your idea on like creating that and like making it such an easy system for people to like sell their stuff?
Yeah, I realized that we were doing a lot of deals just through personal experience with other video game resellers. And it basically arose as a desire to have an easier system for it, where people could go in and they don't have to shoot me a text or an email every time they've got a bunch of stuff. And then I go into pricecharting.com or eBay comps and comp everything out and then shoot them a percentage of like market value based on how valuable or fast selling the item is. I just wanted that to all be automatic and them to be able to add games to a batch to sell to us based on what they know they can pay. So it's not a super novel idea. I mean, sports cards has had and like other kinds of collectibles niches have had buy list programs essentially for a long time. So it's not a new idea. It just didn't really exist within video games, at least not with a competitive pricing structure. Pretty much everyone knows you can go to a video game store and get maybe 25 or 30% of market value for your collection and sell it all at once and not have to deal with anything. But a lot of what we buy is 60, 70, 80, sometimes 100% of price charting value if it's something that for whatever reason we get really good numbers on. Since we are now a volume operation, we're able to offer much higher than most game stores can because our marketplace commands higher prices, and also we have just almost infinite demand with the Amazon marketplace and lower overhead because our operations are really tight.
So is like 100% of sales on Amazon or nearly 100%, or is it?
We probably have like 5 to 10% of our sales are through wholesale, right? There's a lot of kinds of inventory that don't really go well on Amazon that we will sell in bulk to other sellers that don't fit with our model. Right now, we're also dabbling in another platform called Encore, which is pretty new in the video game scene. It's basically eBay, but with video listings. So the upside of that is listing is pretty efficient. I would say a good bit more efficient than eBay because they have an AI listing feature where you create your 10 to 30-second video, and then it automatically fills in the title, all the item specifics, the shipping weight, and everything for you. And then you can just list things in bulk. It's kind of shocking that eBay, maybe it's not shocking at all, that eBay has not developed anything like that in the last 20 years, despite all their competitive advantages. But yeah, Encore, both Encore and Whatnot are kind of more on the cutting edge of seller-friendly features. So previously we've done a good bit on Whatnot. I think our top year was like 600,000. But it is pretty Amazon heavy right now. And that's one of our problems, not problems, but risks that I'm trying to solve this year is just, we're a little bit Amazon dependent in a way that makes me a little uncomfy. We're shooting for 5 million this year in revenue. And that's just a lot of risk to take if 90+% of that is all one source and they were to like shut us down. We have really good account health and everything like that, but there still is a risk factor there.
Yeah,
for sure. Are you selling mostly used or new on Amazon?
Almost exclusively used. And actually most of the new stuff that we sell, we also sell as used, because you just run into a lot more issues when selling new product in the video games category, a lot more restrictions, a lot more complaints, that kind of thing.
It's probably better for the customer too. They think they're getting something used and they get like shrink wrapped. They're like, this is awesome.
Yeah, it's a nice way to kind of over deliver for them.
How does this business model work of the video game specifically? Because is it like all collectibles, or are you like what's the average flip you would get? Like what's the margin? How old is it? That type of thing.
Yeah, so our average buy cost is in the like $12 to $15 range for the things that we are selling on Amazon. And then our average sale price fluctuates between like $41 and $45. So a good chunk of that on Amazon is always going to be fees, but it does leave enough room for us to have pretty healthy margins. Our return rates are between 5 and 7%, which for the electronics category is pretty low. So we're happy about that. We've got a lot of measures in place to make sure stuff is in good condition before it goes out the door. And then in terms of the kinds of items that sell best for us, the Nintendo Wii is definitely our top seller. Our top selling game is Wii Sports. Probably, I mean, by my estimation, it might be the currently most popular game in existence, at least physical game. So yeah, just in general, like everyone kind of knows the Marios and the Pokemons, those are going to fly off the shelves. But yeah, the Wii system, DS and 3DS has been doing really well for us recently as well too.
That's so interesting. So
Yeah.
so what's your target buy cost? So like, let's give a Wii Sports. Maybe that's a good example for people
Mm-hmm.
too. So what's your target buy cost? What can you sell it for like all day?
Yeah, so we offer usually between $21 and $22 for Wii Sports, which for other resellers is very compelling because you're normally going to sell it for around 25 in complete condition on eBay. So after fees, it's like, wait a second, this is about the same. And I'm sure you guys know B2B transactions are way smoother than B2C. So if people can avoid the headache of the questions and the returns and why doesn't this work in my system because the console is actually broken, but I don't realize it. People really enjoy that convenience. So we'll have oftentimes people sell us 20 copies at once of Wii Sports. And then we'll try to sell it for usually just north of 40. So after fees and stuff, it's not a crazy margin, but it's enough that like even factoring in the return rates, even factoring in the labor involved and the supplies and the shipping and all that, we're still able to make our target margin.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and that stuff's not made anymore, right? So like technically your value is always going up. There's only so much in existence, and probably every year a certain percentage of all those games break. Like they're unsellable. That inventory just gets more and more valuable, right?
To an extent, I think it's a lot more contingent upon macroeconomic factors.
Okay.
So something that you'll sometimes hear gamers and collectors say are things like, oh, it's a Pokemon game, it's always going to go up. But historically, that's not the case. If the market overall takes a big dip, video game prices, even though they're somewhat insulated because entertainment spending doesn't tend to go down a ton in recessions, um, they do tend to follow the broader economy, and you'll see booms and busts in prices just like with everything else. So it is true that supply over time is only going to get smaller. That's really nice. But there are other factors like, for example, the proliferation of reproduction cartridges, right, that are fake on all platforms, eBay, Amazon, Walmart. You can get $15 copies of Pokemon Yellow when authentic ones sell for $60+. There's the rise of like modded consoles and emulation on desktop, which has brought a lot of people to a digital only world and outside of physical media collecting or gaming. So there are a lot of things that influence prices. I'm optimistic long term for prices, but I definitely wouldn't say that everything that we sell, the prices will only go up. Otherwise, I'd probably be sitting on a decent amount more inventory. Our strategy is true to the website name. It's all quick flips. We don't really sit on anything. Our whole model is built upon turnover rate and just burning through as much product as possible.
You touched on the long term of digital and that type of stuff. I'm sure most people that watch this are probably like, "There's no way that this guy can do this much in video game sales. Like, who even buys video games anymore?" So, what's your outlook on there in general? And like, is there really explain how there's this many people that still buy physical video games? Because every time I think about it, I just think digital, right? But obviously, if you can sell $5 million, it's a big market.
Yeah, I think there are a few answers. One is that a lot of people aren't necessarily like when you talk about emulation specifically, a lot of people don't have the tech savvy to necessarily do that, to download an emulator and find the files necessary to play Contra on their computer. So they'll just go back to the original hardware, which is what they know and what they're comfortable with. And there's also a nostalgia factor there that you don't get just from downloading a game. And then there's another element of, I've seen, especially among collectors, uh, a growing pushback towards digital only media. I think the more like eShops get shut down and the more people lose access to digital files of their games when, their PS4 breaks down or a shop gets shut down or one of these large companies decides to just rescind the rights to that digital game and they're kind of left up a creek without a paddle. The more people that happens to, the more you find falling into the camp of, actually, I do like to have a physical copy of all of these games, because not only does it mean I can play it for as long as I want and I don't have to worry about it, being taken away for decades to come, but also if there comes a time when I go to sell it, I'll get something for it, right? Rather than just it goes off into the ether. Because if you sell a PS4, for example, with $6,000 worth of digital games on it, it's not worth any more. It's just worth what a PS4 is costing, because GameStop or someone like us is just going to wipe it anyway, right, for the next customer. So,
Yeah, that's cool. What you got, John?
So how many games do you think you process a month, and do you have to test all them, or kind of how do you go about that?
yeah, it's sort of a hybrid model. We test everything that is visually suspect, and we test anything that gets returned to us, but we're tracking our return rates pretty closely. And so the consoles that don't tend to have a lot of returns, if the discs physically, visually look good, then we don't insist on testing all of those before they go out the door. We do have measures in place, like, for example, for all of our cartridges, every single one, the pins will be cleaned before they go out the door, because that increases the rate at which they will work the first time you plug them into a console, right? So returns, if you're not doing that, your returns will be significantly higher on cartridges than on disc-based games, because if people plug it in the first time and it doesn't work because maybe there's a little crud on it or there's been some erosion over time or whatever, they'll just send it back. They don't necessarily all know you have to blow in it and you have to jiggle it a little bit. And, there's all of this voodoo that goes into making an NES game work. Not to mention the fact that the console pins may be corroded as well. We're doing everything we possibly can on our end to maximize the chances of someone having a good experience the first time they plug in a game. Not even necessarily for altruistic reasons, but because we hate getting returns. So we've designed our systems around both minimizing our return rates and maximizing our efficiency.
Did you have a customer support guy? You have to have someone answer. I bet you get some crazy customer support stuff all day of like, this won't work at this. It's just like blow on it. They turn it off.
Yeah. With Amazon, it's not as crazy as with other platforms. I think a lot of people are prone to just go ahead and return it because of how easy returns are. But yeah, we get inquiries almost every day, both now on the Amazon customer side and also on the QuickFlips user side. So that has been something that part of what I'm making all of these hires for is there's a lot of complexity that comes with scaling a business that, okay, before this thing that took 5 minutes a week actually is now like a part-time job now that I'm selling 150 units a day or whatever.
Well, I want to switch topics a bit to YouTube because it's impressive how big your YouTube is. And how long have you been doing that?
Yeah, so the YouTube channel came along about a year after I started reselling. So it's been about 5 years. Ooh, five or 6 years. Yeah, 5. I think I started in early 2020. That I have been just documenting my journey of trying to grow my video game flipping business. My earliest videos were just me sitting in a car outside of pawn shops saying, I got this game for $5 and I think I can get 8 for it after fees. And this was a great one. I got it for $2 and I think it'll go for 12 or whatever. And then over time, I realized that I was just as passionate about making the videos better and better over time as I was about making my flipping business better and better. So what that has looked like is just a lot of iteration, a lot of innovation, and a lot of consistency. I think where a lot of people get trapped is they find a format that works. And then, especially in the resale niche, they'll just do that over and over and over. And as a result, you'll see most resale channels hit a certain point and then they plateau and really don't grow again. I've done everything I can to try to avoid that by constantly experimenting with different formats, constantly implementing traits and tricks that I see from other niches in my own channel, and looking back on every flopped video that I have and every great video that I have and asking, what could I do better, right? What is there to learn here? What, in the good cases, can I re-implement in future uploads? And in the flop cases, why didn't this resonate, right? What are people not finding interesting? What do I need to tweak about my own philosophy and understanding of the platform and of the people who I'm creating these videos for? I'm really bullish overall on YouTube as a marketing vehicle now, because if it weren't for the following that we had on there, there's no way that QuickFlips would have caught on as fast as it has. If it weren't for the fact that I had, when we launched, a 4-year reputation in the industry of showing people firsthand exactly how I do business, how I think about deals, what my values are. It was a much smaller ask for me to say, hey, send me thousands of dollars worth of games in the mail without first receiving payment, because in a way people knew me, right? I had been around a while, and they knew, I think, that I had a lot to lose by trying to scam people. And so that allowed us to scale a lot faster than we would have been able to without a channel. So I'm really grateful that we had that in place. I'm realizing now that QuickFlips, which is, I think, much more of a like traditional business rather than reselling, is often built as a lifestyle business. I'm realizing now that I'm dipping my toes into that to have a marketing department that is itself profitable is pretty singular. Not singular, but it's uncommon, and it's a luxury that I'm really glad we've had this whole time.
Did you think about any of that when you started, or were you just like, I'm gonna just make some videos, or did you see yourself like, I'm gonna have 1 million subscribers on YouTube or whatever?
Not at all. No, all I was thinking was, I think that over time I can do a better job than what I am used to seeing. I think the resale niche in general is kind of in a box, right? It at the time was a lot of, middle-aged white dudes rolling up with a GoPro to a yard sale. That's how I learned almost everything I know. There wasn't a whole lot. There was very little editing, very little storytelling, very little attention to thumbnails or optimization. I didn't even really know about any of that at the time. I just knew, I think I can bring something a little bit different to the table, and the downside risk is pretty low. All I'm risking is my time. And even if the channel stays pretty small, worst case, maybe I'll get more people out there who know I buy video games, and I'll be able to do some more deals as a result. So I think maybe if there's anything to be learned there, just a willingness to start is what will, I think, separate a lot of the winners from the losers. Because if you're not willing to start, you're not going to be able to get to the point of the journey where you realize whether or not something can work. A lot of people get stuck in the pontificating and maybe not, which oftentimes is really fear masquerading as analysis. So I think one thing that I did right was just starting and seeing whether this is something that resonates with people. And as it turns out, it did from fairly early on. There was no point that was like a huge viral moment that, turned my trajectory parabolic. It was just a whole lot of 1% improvements on a formula that I've continued over the course of 5 years.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the hate? When I was doing some research for this, I typed your name in the YouTube, and like, I don't know, maybe it's my algorithm, but like the first, I think like 3 or 5 videos were like, he's a scumbag, he's a
Dang.
scammer. And I think you responded to one of them. I don't know, the guy's name is Steve something.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, damn. I think you even commented on one. You're like, wow, this is painful to watch. Like, I wish you all the best, man, but like, whatever. So how do
Yeah,
you kind of deal with that? I was just kind of like, wow.
that's
Like,
Before we get into that, if you could just take 1 second, like this video, we would greatly appreciate it. It really helps get this out to more people, and that will allow us to get better guests for you guys. And if you are feeling extra generous, leave a comment what you like about it or tag us on social. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to the episode.
fortunate that those are popping up before my videos are. I need to step my game up a little bit.
SEO.
But yeah, how do I deal with the hate? That answer has definitely evolved over time. I did not anticipate when I start. There's sort of levels to it, right? Because when I first started out, I would get a hate comment, and it felt kind of like a badge of honor, right? Kind of like a rite of passage. Like, I'm starting to really make it on this platform. If now there aren't just people finding my videos who are likely to agree with everything I say, but it's also getting pushed to people who are likely to disagree. That's kind of cool. And, this is something that I know YouTubers have to deal with. I love it. And then as that sort of starts to grow and grow, and I started to see trends in the haters, I adopted more of a posture of, like, let's use this and kind of laugh it off in a way that is additive to the rest of my audience, right? So I would create bits. I had a character called Hater Hank where I would say what I knew the haters were likely to respond to about a certain video or a certain deal. I'm underpaying, I'm overpaying, I'm ripping someone off, whatever. And tried to turn it into sort of a recurring bit that people would enjoy. After enough time of that, and also as simultaneously the channel was getting to a point where there are entire other channels that are built on making hate videos about my channel, which I don't know if that's a badge of honor. It feels less like a badge of honor for sure, because there are communities that now are developing around being anti-Phoenix resale. That's when I started to realize I had aligned myself and aligned my brand so much around what other dissenters think about me that when I would meet real life flesh and blood people at conventions and stuff, oftentimes one of the first things they would say to me is, hey man, keep your head up, right? Like, ignore the haters. You're doing great. Keep doing you. Don't worry about what everyone else is thinking about and saying about you. And I realized, okay, this is actually hurting what I want to do long term. It's fun, to like make light of all this stuff and to joke around, but ultimately I'm causing a greater association of people with me, with the hate. And there are people, honestly, the vast majority of my audience who never would have even known about this whole community of dissenters if I hadn't made them aware of it. So ever since I realized that, and I just realized that this subsection of the gaming collecting community that's a little bit more, I think, just sad, and behind in life, and are looking for someone to pin that on and to pin the rise in collecting prices and a whole slew of things that are going on. It's easy to be able to point a finger at someone. Where was I actually going with that? I realized that giving more mental space to that crowd was not serving me, and I had to switch strategies. And so at that point, I actually stopped reading the comments entirely and also stopped making reference to them in my own content. This was probably a year and a half ago. So that's a really long way of saying, in different stages of my journey, I've had different responses to it. And that's something that I think our brains just aren't really wired to handle well. So I've had different strategies of coping with it as time has gone on. But the really nice thing that actually has come out of that whole journey, and out of being pretty public with my evolving response to it, I actually made a whole video on my second channel about how to deal with a lot of people hating you. I think it actually has brought some hope and comfort to other creators who are dealing with similar stages, right? To be able to see, okay, I'm at this part of the journey of more and more people hating me. And if nothing else, at least I'm not alone in that. So that's been a nice thing to experience.
I really like that take on it too, because I was listening to something about Hormozy, and he was talking about how he got bad gym equipment and like he paid up front and all this other stuff, and he's like, instead of blasting them and giving them all this attention and like potentially someone going over there and buying from them, I'm just not going to mention them by name.
Yeah.
And just be like, this was a shitty experience. Like, if you really want to know, like, send me a DM or whatever. But like, I'm not going to acknowledge them. So I think that's a really great strategy.
Yeah.
Is that something you guys have experienced at all? Are there any side hustle experiment dissenters out there?
No, I probably have more haters than John, but it probably, I mean, I'm not as active. So like, no, we haven't really experienced anything like that. But what I try to think about, I'm so happy you said this, like what Rogan says is like, it's kind of all fake unless you make it real, right? Like if no one told you those people existed, you would not even know. And when you address them, you make it real. Like that's kind of what it seems like, but it's really hard to ignore it. But I guess turn it on, like not looking at the comments and all that stuff, positive or negative, is probably way better for your mental health than making it reality.
Yeah, that's definitely true to my experience, that it really is the case that those kinds of people, in a sense, aren't real. I don't want to, diminish people who are just in a bad spot.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, like if you're in a position where you're leaving nasty comments on the internet, like you probably don't really like your life very much. And so I want to be careful to be like overly dismissive of those types. I try to lead with empathy instead. But there's a drastic difference between my experience as an online creator and my experience of the video game collecting and reselling community in real life. Because I very often, probably 6 to 10 times a year, will go to retro video game conventions, right? And so I meet a lot of people, both who have and haven't seen my channel, and they tend to just be lovely. It's just a really heartwarming, nice experience of people who are passionate about the same stuff, and in the best case, they've seen my videos and tell me what they've meant to them, and it's just delightful. And so seeing the juxtaposition of that and the comment section does make me think, man, these, like, where are these people in real life. It seems like they don't really like to get out all that much, or if they do, they're not likely to approach me and spread that kind of same toxicity, which really does lend itself to suggesting, yeah, this whole world of the comment section, it's a secondary reality where people feel a lot more free to spout a lot of venom, and if it's less real, that's even more reason to not really dwell there.
Yep. Well, I want to switch gears into a little bit of productivity stuff because I watched one of your videos and it was amazing. The storytelling thing you're talking about, you were very good at keeping attention. Like it's like I'm watching a little movie, really. And I remember watching. I watched you years ago, and I didn't know until interviewing today. I'm like, I've watched this guy a bunch. So, how do you like stay productive about all this stuff? Because you have like all these things going on. How are you like writing a story for a YouTube video and then figuring out video game stuff? Like, how do you do all this stuff and stay? I don't even know. Like not insane, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. A lot of it is, especially right now, I've got a lot of great help. So my first hire was my friend Spencer, who was essentially my right-hand man. He basically learned how to do almost everything that I do. And so he learned how to list stuff on Whatnot and eBay and Amazon. And then he learned how to help me shoot videos and, was a videographer. And then he learned how to train people to like check in these packages. And so I think a lot of what has kept me sane and the parts of my journey where I have felt the least sane have been where I'm neglecting delegating in some way, right? Or I don't have the resources to yet. So I've realized that a lot of what scaling is and the reason why growing in business is so painful is that there are inevitably seasons when you have more work than you have workers, right? Because as you're going from a 5-person business to a 6-person business, you can either hire the 6th before you have work for them and then they're just kind of sitting around and you're burning money, or you wait to hire the 6th until for multiple months in a row you've had enough work for 6 people, which is the much safer way to hire. But it also means that as the owner of the business, the one who's doing that extra work is going to be you. Yep. So there definitely have been seasons, and I'm actually just coming out of one right now, where Spencer, my main guy, just went from full-time to part-time because he took a job in ministry, which he's wanted to do all along, and I'm super thrilled for him. But for that time where we were Spencerless, given that he's the only one besides me that knows how to do everything, it was rough, right? Because I not only have to do everything on the YouTube side and do everything to continue to build and optimize our systems, but also train people who are coming in, also find a new person to take this role, and also do all the management of the other 8 people that he previously was doing, right? Because they're now asking me questions and all this stuff. So very happy to announce that as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, we did find someone to fill that role, and she's been killer. But the way to stay sane is just knowing at what point you can't continue to delay having help. And then quickly finding that person, delegating whatever is sort of the lowest tier of your skill set that you can, so that you can elevate and think about the higher leverage parts of the business, which for me right now is more and more in the area of marketing and business partnerships.
Interesting.
Interesting.
What do you got, John?
So I was watching, I think it was the video that it was like you did $3 million from your basement. And I had like a whole bunch of notes from it. And
oh, great.
I'm not trying to contradict you, but like in one of your things you said, keep it small and keep it all.
Yes.
What made you change? Because now, like, I think then it was just you and Spencer, maybe at that point in the video. And then when you're like, oh, I'm getting a warehouse. I think in that video, you're like, I don't know if I want a warehouse or a video game because it's really risky. And now, like, when you're talking now, I'm like, oh, wow, like, what changed?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's probably been the single biggest shift that I've made in this last year. And I think a lot of people, one tough thing about being online is it's hard to grow without giving people the impression of hypocrisy, right? Because YouTube is sort of outside of time, right? If people see one video where you were saying, I want to stay in the basement forever, and then in the next video in their algorithm, for whatever reason, it might be from 2 years in the future, you're like, I'm moving into a warehouse, right? That looks in that 10-minute time span that they saw those two things, like, this is a total hypocrite, when in reality there might have been a 10-month decision making process to shift your goals between there. So what that has looked like for us is, I reached a point this last year where I realized that in order to do two platforms well, not just Amazon well, but either Amazon and wholesale or Amazon and Encore or Amazon and eBay, we need to leave the basement. So I had a belief earlier on that staying in the basement is the safest thing to do for the business, right? But I realized that the basement only allows for a level of scale where you can really do one platform well. And it has to be a platform where you're not storing any inventory, because there ain't space for that. So when I realized that, and I started to feel more and more deeply the riskiness of being Amazon dependent and not having a great plan B if Amazon were to fall through, that's when I slowly had to realize we can't stay here. It actually is more risky to stay in the business, to stay in the basement rather, than it would be to grow, because that allows us to build ourselves essentially another leg of our revenue stool, right? So that if one leg gives out, we can still stay in our seat and not fall over. That's the whole goal and analogy that I've been using as I'm both talking with the team and our finance guy, and just having the perpetual internal monologue that comes with business ownership. That is, if we can add one more leg to this stool, to our revenue stool, it will be a lot less shaky. And that leg can't be added while we're still in the basement. We're dabbling in it right now. I'm experimenting with Encore. I'm experimenting with. I may, depending on how that goes, I may do a little bit more dabbling in Whatnot or eBay. But all that said, that's the biggest reason why my perspective changed on how long can we stay in the basement.
Have you thought about in person at all? I know there's not a lot of video game stores around us, I don't think, in the direct area. Have you ever thought about opening one here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have thought about it. One of my biggest guiding principles right now has been, I don't really like dealing directly with customers. So having that Amazon intermediary and doing a lot of wholesale volume has really helped with that. That said, I don't mind the idea as much as I used to now that the team's bigger, and I know that I wouldn't really have to be there all that much. And I also know that Lexington, we're very lacking in mom and pop game stores. We've got GameStop and we've got CM Games out here, like charging crazy prices for games. And we've got Game Exchange, a couple locations, which I actually really like. But no local ones. Well, we do have Matt's Games, but he's more on the Lego side. So I would love for there to be one here. I don't know if I would really love to run it, because that's just a little tougher. It would be cool to have like a physical space to like bring people to do deals, right? Or to host trade events or things like that. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Right now, it seems a little bit less aligned with sort of the efficiencies of our company, right? Being able to move stuff super fast, because if you have a store, you're sort of at the mercy of what people happen to buy in a physical space. But I could be saying something totally different this time next year.
Yeah, I guess it would be a kind of tough. The gauging the demand would be a little tough too. I don't know how you would get how many people are going to be in the store. Is it worth it to keep it open all the time every day? That would be a real tough part, I feel like, of in-store stuff.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of tough parts. It definitely comes with higher staffing needs. It comes with completely different point of sale system and pricing strategy and training systems and storage and refurbishment. And you have to build a returns process, and there's security and insurance. And, there's a lot of headaches that I just have not really had to dip my toes in yet. and branching into a model that's just a different online platform, we've already got a good number of efficiencies there, which is why I'm more drawn to it, even though the game store model would solve a decent number of our current problems.
Yeah, I guess if you continue to get bigger on YouTube, and I don't know if you're on TikTok and stuff like that, but you know, like some of those places, people travel to just go to like meet the guy or just be at their place like that. I could definitely see that being a big thing in the future as well.
Yeah, we definitely have the potential to have kind of a destination store. I really wouldn't necessarily want to do it any other way,
Yeah.
just because I think that's more and more the direction of retail. Like if someone's going to get off their couch and go to a physical store, they want to have a great, exceptional experience where they enjoy spending a couple hours looking through the shelves and that having that nostalgia hit, and they enjoy seeing the other regulars and going to the weekly trade event or whatever. And there is part of me that likes that idea. I just also know, because I know some people that own game stores, the amount of work that goes into doing that well, and it's like years worth of work. Like my friend Retro Rick is just now getting to the point with his store after maybe 2.5 years of owning it, where he's really happy. There aren't like a million things that he's trying to change. And I'm just, that's a lot to commit to.
Yeah, because I've saw multiple YouTube videos, right, where you're like, never open a store. This guy says why you should never open a store, that type of thing. Is that kind of the stuff you've learned from interviewing those people?
Yeah, that's a good point. I do kind of have an unfair advantage of being pretty close to and having extended conversations with those people. So one quote that I heard a couple weeks ago is, the grass is always greener on the other side, but that's because it's fertilized with crap. And so the takeaway is, don't trade the crap you know for the crap you don't know. And because I'm close to a lot of these game store owners, I actually know a decent amount of the crap that it takes to fertilize their green grass. And I'm like, it's less romantic to me than it would be to the average person saying, "Oh, I'd love to own a game store," because of those relationships, I now know what it takes, and it's a lot.
What you got, John?
In one of your videos, you said winners adapt fast. How have you kind of adapted fast, and can you give a little bit more context to that?
Yeah, one of my favorite podcasts is called "How to Take Over the World." Do you guys ever listen to that?
No.
Isn't it the My First Million, like, old podcast producer, I think?
It could be. I know that he
Producer
and
Ben, I
the
think.
MFM guys are pretty tight, at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's essentially these like sort of mini biographies in audio form of a lot of history's greatest like rulers and CEOs and inventors and innovators. Um, and one of the most common trends from everyone from like Steve Jobs to Julius Caesar is an obsession with speed. So a lot of the greatest like conquerors, for example, throughout history were known for taking smaller battalions than they necessarily could have so that they could march them faster and take their enemies by surprise. Um, and obviously, you have millions of examples in Silicon Valley of like speed wins. That's one of the mantras that we say in my business all the time. Speed wins. And I think your rate of change, your rate of improvement, your rate of adaptation is one of the biggest factors that will determine whether over the long term you live or die. I can't say that with full confidence because, the business is 5 years old. We've beat the odds for, the first 5 years. What is it, like 90% of businesses fail in the first 5 years? But the problem is, of those that survive, 90% also fail in the next 5. So we've beat the odds once. We haven't fully twice, so I can't say that with full confidence. But I can say that every single one of my team members will tell you the rate at which we change things, the rate at which we improve things, the rate at which we test and fail and discard new ideas is probably a heck of a lot faster than especially the average reseller team. Because we're just obsessed with it. We're obsessed with making things better. And I'm convinced that's the only way to do the kind of volume that we're doing with the team size that we currently have while keeping operations tiny so that we can keep margins relatively small, keep our prices really high and competitive, and continue to be able to grow this thing in a sustainable way that isn't pushing the boundaries of our wallets the whole time in a stressful way. Because the other thing about our company, we have no venture funding, we have no outside investment, it's all bootstrapped. So to grow in a sustainable way, I think takes a real dedication to making everything as quick, as snappy, as efficient as it possibly can be.
It's a great segue. I try to ask every guest on what they think helps people make it, or what's the one factor that like what's going to help someone make it in any of these industries or whatever. When you can't say consistency, what's your number one factor you'd attribute to success? And if you can give a real life example, that'd be great as well.
Can I say the union of obsession with progress and time?
Yeah, definitely.
That's a little bit like consistency because that's a component of it. But one thing that I've realized over the course of my business career is that money is not the only thing that compounds over time. Relationships do, business connections do, depth of knowledge of your industry does. And that's something that like I can say right now, but all the people listening who are just starting to dabble in a certain side hustle or another, you're not going to really understand that inside until you've done something for 3, 4, 5 years and you start to see, oh, this time 3 years ago, I never had people texting me for deals. That's new. I want more of that in the future, right? Or this time 3 years ago, I didn't have an entire contact list in my phone of people that I can hit up and say, hey, are you sitting on like any stale inventory right now? I didn't have people who were emailing me getting referred from like some pawn shop owner that I know down the street because now I have a reputation, right? I didn't have deals coming to me. So that's the over time component is business, like money, can compound over time, but it's only most likely to if you're also obsessed with speed and obsessed with constant improvement. Like I've been hinting at on the YouTube side all along, the specific way that took for me just this morning is I was looking downstairs at we have a shelf of games that need their cases replaced, right? Like this Cubivore here, if it came in super dirty or really stickered or the plastic was ripped, we would toss it into the GameCube replace case box. But I realized that my intake team, wasn't actually using that because we had a bin that also is a replace case bin that had every console game in there that they could just toss a whole stack of Wii stuff and GameCube stuff and Xbox stuff in there all at once. And I realized, having our replace case boxes distinguished by console on this shelf isn't actually helping efficiency. It's costing us time. So I spent, 20 minutes redoing that whole shelf, getting out another bin from the closet, labeling that a different kind of replace case. And now we have 2 replace case bins rather than 9 different boxes. And that's saving people an extra step. That's a 1% pretty small improvement that when you combine that with dozens of other improvements like that we've made over the last quarter or last year, it makes for a system that is significantly more efficient than something someone else would be likely to design. And most importantly, the entire team knows that nothing around here is sacred. And if they see a shelving system that is poorly labeled or that's causing an extra step or that no one is using because it's inefficient, they can change that, right? And if it sucks, guess what? We'll undo it, right? It's also, no change is sacred either. But what is really special about our business is that everyone has this mentality of looking for things that suck and looking for ways to make them better.
Awesome.
That's really good. I mean, I think a lot of people underestimate that in their Amazon business. I don't know if you know who Caleb Roth is, but he's the book flipper, or used to be the book flipper, and he used to do books. And one of his big things is like the people who make the most money touch the book the least amount of times. So for my business, like I used to scan them. If it's good, you put it in a bag, then you put it on a table, then you sort it. But then when we started like scanning the book, if it's good, we grade it right away, whether this is good or not. Put it in a pot, and then it just makes things go so much quicker. It seems dumb in the moment, and yes, you might make some mistakes because maybe you're not grading it as closely as if you're doing it instead of in the moment. It just picks up so much more efficiencies, and I think a lot of people don't realize that 1%, like you were just saying before, the compounding over time of those 1% moments really makes all the difference.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Well, man, we're coming up on the time cutoff. Do you have any final words of wisdom for the viewers?
I have a quote that is, I'm a tennis player. You may be able to see from my shirt that is written at the walls of Wimbledon from a tennis icon, Steffi Graf. She said, "Pressure is a privilege." And that's something that when things are hard, when we are in that stage of business where we need the sixth, but we only have five, and I'm spending every day going to sleep and waking up thinking about all of our business problems and how to take us to the next level without everything spontaneously combusting, I try to remind myself and trigger that frame of pressure is a privilege. I worked really hard to get to feel this pain. I just didn't realize what it would feel like. So when my mind shifts from this sucks to actually, I've earned this, right? It feels bad, but in a way that in itself is kind of special. It makes things a lot easier.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Where can people find you and anything you want to plug?
If you've got video games that you would love to turn into fast, fair cash, you can go to MyQuickFlips.com. We'd be thrilled to do more business with you. We're looking this year to do a lot more business with other resellers, right? People that consistently are finding stuff, maybe out at the yard sales or at the bins or at pawn shops or estate sales, wherever you're sourcing. I want QuickFlips to be essentially another tool in every reseller's belt, to where, like, even if you don't specialize in video games, you can now pick them up because you can, on our mobile app, look them up on the fly and see a guaranteed price offer. On socials, I'm Phoenix Resale everywhere. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys having me.
Thanks
It was
so much
awesome.
for doing this. Guys, like, subscribe, go follow him, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Peace.
Peace.
If you enjoyed this episode and know someone else that would enjoy this episode, if you could send them this episode, literally just copy and paste a link, send them on Instagram DM. Everyone loves to network. This is a great way to do it, a very easy way. It helps grow the podcast and get better guests. So the more the podcast gets shared, the more views we get, the better guests we could get for you. We would really, really appreciate it. And tag us on social media and we will share it as well.